So now we're on Daf Tzadi Dalid Amid Beis, and we're about to embark on a machlokas Ketzad Osino. So what was the shape of the lechem upon? And here the Gemara records machlokas Shin Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chanina Omar Kimin Teva Prutza. Like, let's say you have a box, but it has no cover on top. That's called Prutza. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Kimin Svina Rokedis. Like a canoe that is, going up and down the waters of the sea. Rokedis looks like it's dancing. And if you see the two shapes that Rashi has on the top, the first one, which is Rabbi Chanina, that's Kimin Teva Paretzes, Pruta. And basically it's like a square box, just doesn't have a cover on. However, the second shape, which is like a V shape, a diagonal, that's Rabbi Yochanan. Like a canoe comes to a point. So now the Gemara is going to embark upon an analysis of this machlokas about the shape of the lechem upon it. Bishleim, I understand Laman Yokim Teva Prusa Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chanina's understanding. That is very good because Hainu Dahavi Yasve Bezichen. Right, the halacha is that you have these spoons, two of them, that contain the levona, which I think in English is called frankincense. Anyway, whatever it is. So imagine you have this spoon. It kind of looks like a little bit like a measuring spoon, if you know what I mean. Right? It's got a handle and a thing. And it's obviously flat on the bottom. Now, the bazichin have to sit on top of the lechamim. So if the lechamim are flat, which is Rabbi Chanina, then it makes sense that you can sit down and place down the levona of the Shnei Bazichin on top. But if we go with Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, the Amar Kmin Svina Rokedes, that it looks like a boat, that the bread itself was shaped like a boat, then Hechi Aviyasvi Bazichin. How can you put the bazichin on something that comes to a point? It's going to shake back and forth. It won't be able to maintain itself. He says the levona is placed upon the bread. According to Rabbi Chanina, the bread has a wide, flat bottom, right? It's like like a box. So the spoons, meaning the bazichin of the levona, would rest nicely upon the bread. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, the bread had no bottom, but rather it was shaped like a canoe, and it came to a V shape. It came to a point. Then it's impossible to put the bazichin on top of the bread, because if the bread is shaped like this, it's going to shake back and forth. He mentions in the footnote, this is way beyond us, probably about 3 or 4 days down the line, that there's going to be a machlokas exactly where they put the levona. But we're now holding that we had 6 loaves of bread on each side, shtei marachos of sheish, and you put the levona on the top, laying it down on the top of the top bread. And the Gemara answers, makom avid luhu. It would seem that, let's say this is your canoe, right? This is your bread. So imagine that you sort of like dig out a little bit of a hole on one of the walls of the bread, creating a kind of a shelf so that you can put the bazich, into that flat little enclave. Let's see what he says here. He calls it hollowing out a resting place for the spoon in one of the walls. I think we said it even better. Anyway, now the Gemara has the second kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Bishleim Lamanti Yomer, I understand according to Rabbi Chanina, Kimin Teva Prutza, Hainu Tavi Yasve Konim. Right? So on each bread, they would put these like poles, half poles, not full poles, but half poles. And that would sit very nicely again on the bread because the bread was flat. El Lamandi according to Rabbi Yochanan, how would they sit? Meaning, once again, the bread is, what is it going to stand on the chudo, on its point? It's going to move back and forth. And if it moves back and forth, then these poles, if you will, or half poles, will slip off to the left or to the right. He calls them thin half rods. A guy called them poles, he calls them rods, were placed between the loaves. So what was first of all, let's understand for a moment, what was the purpose of these konim? So that bread, after it's baked, obviously is very warm and very moist. And if you put one bread on top of the other, it's not going to be good for the bread. The bread is going to get moldy or moist. So you need to sit each bread as you go up, ascending, on these rods. And the rods would give a little bit of an airspace between one loaf and the other. But if we accept Rabbi Yochanan's description of the lechem aponim, kimin sfina rokedes, which means that it came to a point, then these rods are not going to, they're going to just, as we said before, shift from one side to the other. The Gemara says, Mo Rasha Ovidle. Imagine if you have a canoe, right? And then you extend the canoe on both ends. Like in the case of the bread, they would like extend the bread outward on both sides, and it had a certain height to it, and they could place the rods on that extended part. Now, I'm not sure exactly where the extended part was. Was it on the top or on the bottom? Let's just see if by chance he mentions this. Let me just see. No, he just says they would attach extra bits of dough to the front and the back of the loaf. But I'm not sure if it's towards the bottom or towards the top. I'm not sure. Oh, interesting. The art school has a picture here. Let me just see. Yeah. This is exactly what we were talking about, right? That if you go like Rabbi Chanina, so the poles would sit nicely in this square loaf. But if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, then you've got this canoe and you've got rods, and it's going to shift from one side to the other. Okay. Bishleim Lamanti Omar Kivin Teva Prutza. Now the Gemara goes in the opposite direction. Let's support. No. I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. We're still supporting Reb Chanina. Is Hainu de Samchile Snifin Lelechem. So until now we've been talking about the konim, and now we're talking about the snifim. Snifim are the walls on the side of the shulchan. And they keep the lechem, each one of the loaves, in place. So hainu de samchile snifim lelechem. We can understand how these snifim, right, these walls, will support the bread. Because the bread is square. Again, it might be rectangular, but what I mean to say is that, there's a flat side. going vertically up. El aman yom kivin svina rokedes heichi samchi leisnifa lechem. What's going to happen now? You've got a canoe, and now you put walls on the side of the canoe. The canoe is still going to shift back and forth. It's not going to protect the bread. And the answer is the agil lahu mi agil. That somehow what they're going to do with these snifim, with these walls, is that they're going to shape them in a round, I call it like a semicircle, which will allow part of the bread to fit into that hole of the semicircle, and that's going to hold the loaf in place. Now we go the other way around. Bishleim, I understand. Rabbi Yochanan, Lamad Yom Kimin Sfina Rokedes Hainu Devinyan Snifin. Right, the loaf of bread, according to Rabbi Yochanan, by its very nature, since it's on a chud, it's on an edge, on an angle, a V-shaped angle, it's going to shift from side to side. I need walls on both sides to hold it up. But why not just put one bread on top of the other, separated by the konim? The bread is not going anywhere. It's not shifting to the left or to the right. Why do you need these walls? And the Gemara answers, Agav Yurka de Lechem Tlach. If you don't keep the breads in check, hold them down by the two walls, then because yukra means they're very heavy, the breads might break. So you've got to sort of clamp them in. Once again, the Gemara is going to support Rav Chanina. Isnifen al gabi shulchan munachim. Let's just read a little bit further. Meaning, according to you, Rabbi Chanina, that the breads are shaped like a box, then how are you going to attach the snifim, meaning the walls? What are you going to put them underneath the bread? Where are they going to go? Meaning, the walls have to have like an L shape in order to hold the breads. They're not just two vertical walls. It's got to be L-shaped. Now, if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, that it's a canoe, then there's plenty of room to put in these walls, meaning that attachment to the breads. Because you have that whole angle that's open on both sides. But if you hold like Rabbi Chanina, the bread is on the bottom of the shulchan. How are you going to put the fork underneath the breads? And the answer is, says the Gemara, it's going to be held up on the floor. The Gemara says that's exactly so. The Omer Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo, L'divrei Omer Kamin Svina Rokedes Snifin Al Gabi Shulchan Menachim, right? The 90-degree angle that juts out will be on the table. But L'divrei Omer Kamin Teva Prutza, how are you going to put it underneath? Is Snifin Al Gabi Karka Munach. Gemara asks, Kiman Azal Hod Rabbi Yehuda. Can we prove from Rabbi Yehuda what he holds about the shape of the lechem upon it? Says Rabbi Yehuda, lechem ma'amid es hasnifim. V'hasnifim ma'amidim es halechem. There's can I call it a symbiotic relationship here, where the snifim, the walls, are helped by the weight of the lechamim, of the lechem, and at the same time, the walls are helping the breads. So the Gemara says that Kimandi Omer can mean Sfina Rokedes. This statement of Rabbi Yehuda about the mutual help over here would reflect his understanding like Rabbi Hanina. I'm sorry, like Rabbi Yochanan. Sorry. That's a Sfina Rokedes. If it's a Sfina Rokedes, then on the one hand, we said that the fork is going to keep the Sfina in place and help the breads. But on the other hand, the bread is going to support the walls. But according to Reb Chanina, the walls of the loaves were flush with the sides of the shulchan, leaving no room upon which to set down the snifa. Let's just learn a little bit on Daf Sadihei. The Gemara is Meisveh. So that's the final conclusion here of this Gemara to support and conclude that Rabbi Yehuda holds Sfina Rokedes. It's very interesting because most of the Gemara seems to support the Shita that it is a what you call prutza, a teva prutza. But the Rambam paskins, if I'm not mistaken, no. The Rambam paskins it's a teva prutza, even though at the end we said that Rabbi Yehuda seems to reflect the Shita that's a Sfina Rokedes. But I think the Rambam is based on the fact that most of the sugya seems to support Rabbi Hanina that it's kimin teva prutza. Yeah. Rabosai, do you mind if I add another 5 minutes? We're on Tzadi Hey. If you have to go, you have to go. Meisvei. The Gemara now raises a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, whose opinion is that it's a Sfina Rokedes. Kimin kaveres hoyela batanu. Inside the oven that they baked the breads in, the mold looked like a kaveres. Kaveres is a forget what it's called in English. Where they keep the bees, a honeycomb, I think it's called, right? And the honeycomb has punctured holes in it. Vidoma kimin tavla merubas. But the shape of the mold of the tfus, we're up to the second tfus that's inside the oven, was square. Merubas means miloshen ribua, square. Now that implies that the bread had that shape, if that was the mold. And that would only make sense, according to Rav Chanina, that it was a square. So the Gemara now changes the text of this brisa in order to defend Rabbi Yochanan. Ema upia dome kimin tavla merubas, that the opening was like a square. And that makes sense because you're talking about the top of the mold, whereas the Sfina Rokedes of Rabbi Yochanan comes to an angle on the bottom. And Tanya, we have a brisa, Kiman Diomer Kimin Sfina Rokedes. Again, we have another proof to that second sheet of Rabbi Yochanan. The Sanya we learned to the brisa, Arba Snifin Shel Zav Hayusham, Mefutzolam Mirasheim Kimin Dakronim Hayu, Shesomchim Be'enes Halechem, Shudome Kimin Sfina Rokedes. So the brisa tells us there were 4 props of gold with projections at the top, like branched reeds, and the Kohanim used this to support the bread, which looked like a Sfina Rokedes. So the brisa seems to be outspoken about the fact that the shape of the lechem, like Rabbi Yochanan, was Kisfina Rokedes. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop here on Daf Tzadi Hey for today. And let me just take a minute of your time to discuss tomorrow, if you have a second.